Welcome to Outta Pocket. Here's your host, Michael Davis.
It's time to get out of pocket. I'm your host, Michael Davis, joined by a familiar face. You guys might have recognized him, and he's gotten some recognition on our Facebook as being one of my co-hosts, or my only co-host, for the Stars and Spikes podcast we did last year. Of course, had to take the fall off from doing podcast adventures, so it's good to be joined by my good friend, Mr. Esteban Serrano. Esteban, how are you doing today, my friend?
Well, I'm doing great considering my Stars are in the Western Conference Finals for hockey right now. Just saw some good basketball last night, so I'm ready to talk about it, Mike.
Dude, it's a big time for Texas fans, whether you're rooting for the Mavs, the Stars, the Rangers as well. Rangers won a World Series last year, and we're going to talk about why I didn't mention the Cowboys in that list a little later on. But, dude, speaking of champions, I hope the Texas Rangers have better luck this year than the Denver Nuggets had this year against the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Denver Nuggets losing Game 7 on their home court to the Minnesota Timberwolves. And we're seeing Anthony Edwards, Karl-Anthony Towns, and the four-time Defensive Player of the Year, Rudy Gobert, advance to the Western Conference Finals. The champions are going home. Dude, what was your initial reaction to that game last night? And are you surprised that the Denver Nuggets are going home early?
Well, watching it, it was like the wheels just fell off for Denver. Like, it was so weird to see that game midway through I would say halftime, we were kind of like, well, Denver's maybe got it, right? They were up by, I think, like 20 or somewhere between 15 and 20 at that point. And then it shifted over a little bit. Minnesota got the upper hand in the third. They cut it to 6, I think. And then in the fourth, that was probably one of the craziest fourth quarters I've ever seen in a Game 7. Something about the biggest comeback by any team in a Game 7 as well in the NBA playoffs. We have to fact check me on that, but it was weird to see Denver like lose the wheels at the end. Like the wheels just fell off for them. Minnesota played better defense. They have a good defense already, obviously, with those big three that you mentioned, and the Defensive Player of the Year and Rudy Gobert. But my initial reaction was, wow, Denver's out, and now I can remember Kevin Harlan, if it was 6 or 7 years, I think it's 6 now, consecutive years, that a team has not, a defending champion has not gone past the second round of the playoffs. That is an interesting statistic to me. I don't know why that is. And it may just be that, I guess you expect more out of Denver in the sense that, they're used to winning and they've won a championship already. And they have this, not super team, but they have this team that has an anatomy to win championships. And, but this just also goes to tell you, Mike, how hard it is to go back to back. I mean, the teams that did it in the 2000s, you look at those teams and they're stacked, all the Lakers teams and everything like that. And it was a different time, right? And now we're getting out of that era too, where it's kind of like, let's not go after the super team anymore. Let's not try to build a super team. Let's just build through the draft. Let's see what free agency has to offer, and we'll go from there. We're coming to that stage in the NBA again.
Yeah, and if people have been watching Out Pocket the last few weeks, I mean, Dez has said it's a changing of the guard because we're seeing teams like the Oklahoma City Thunder just come out of nowhere. They only have one real star in SGA, but he's not even reached his full potential yet. And they're the number 1 seed out west, and they lost to the Mavs this past weekend. We'll talk about that here in just a moment. But, I mean, the coach was not happy yesterday in the press conference. Coach Malone for the Denver Nuggets was asked by a reporter, how do you feel about, losing Game 7, being up by 20? And he's like, I'll paraphrase because I can't use his exact words, but he basically called it out as a stupid question. And whether it's a 20-point, blowing the lead or losing, you still lost and you're still going home. Now, I'm sure if this was LeBron James, everybody would be like, this hurts his legacy going home a little early. But when you look at Nikola Jokic, does this hurt his legacy as he's trying to build his resume in terms of one of the best basketball players at least this generation or maybe ever?
No, because being as young as he is, he won a championship already. So he already has a resume with that season. It's just a matter of now, moving forward with Denver, how is free agency going to affect the team? Right? Because to my understanding, and I don't have too much prior knowledge on this, but a lot of those players right now are either free agents or their contracts are going to expire come this offseason. So it's kind of going to be a weird game with Denver next year, especially in the West, where you're starting to see a lot more competitiveness open up. And I won't say fall yet, but the fall of like the Warriors, the Lakers, them still trying to light the little fuse that they have or whatever they have left to salvage it because it's coming to an end already. So, no, Jokic is still young enough to where I think he's probably going to get like 2 more rings, if I'm going to be honest with you, Mike. He's such a good big man that even if he were to leave Denver, which I don't surmise he is anytime soon, I still expect Denver to be like a good team when, the playoffs come around and they're seeding high or whatever. It's just one of those things, and now in the next 5 years, we talk about whether or not Jokic can win another championship is a different story, right? And if he doesn't, then maybe there's something wrong and maybe he needs to find an adjustment. But right now, I think he has a lot of time on his hands and future years coming up, it's going to look pretty spectacular for him, I think.
Yeah, and here's what people need to realize, and you guys can chime in on our YouTube channel through Tobacco Road Sports Radio. Your comment gets to pop up on the screen. You get to talk to myself and Esteban. Dez will be back tomorrow, I believe, for Top Rope Tuesday when we talk about that on Out of Pocket. But, dude, like, Nikola Jokic probably should be a 4-time MVP at this point because he was robbed of the MVP last year when Joel Embiid won it, and they had voters fatigue. But my personal pick was Luka Doncic from Dallas. Mavs beat the Thunder, but the Pacers beat the Knicks out east, meaning that the Knicks are going home. Dude, the Knicks were injury-ridden all playoff long, and it was just the cherry on top that Jalen Brunson fractured his hand in this weekend's game against the Pacers, and that's how the Knicks season will end. It's a big what if when it comes to looking at this Knicks team when Jalen Brunson, fractured his hand yesterday. Mitchell Robinson out for the playoffs. Julius Randle out. OG Anunoby was out. Josh Hart was out. Like all their guys were like sitting on the sideline. It's very unfortunate. Do you think this Knicks team could have actually pushed past Boston and made it to the NBA Finals if they were healthy?
Again, that's just a what if question, right? Like that's not the scenario, so we wouldn't know. And it feels like, going back into like the history that this team has, the Knicks and like the 90s and all these injuries that they've endured and, them still finding a way to become that underdog and to make their way in the playoffs has been pretty remarkable too. And then you look at it now with all the injuries, like you said, they're sitting on the bench and then they lose to Indiana. What was it, by 21 points in that last game? It was 130 to 109. So I don't know if they would get past Boston. It would definitely be a good series because of that Northeast rivalry. Like we see it already with the Yankees and the Red Sox. Those two cities hate each other. So if they were to play each other in basketball to advance to the finals, I mean, that would be something interesting. But that's not the scenario right now, Mike. I mean, Indiana they blew it out of the water. They dominated that game.
Yeah, and honestly, if Indiana's shooting like they are, and they have been, dude, they're unstoppable. Like, not many teams are going to put up 120, 130, 140 points a game, and you just can't compete with that in a 7-game series. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens between Boston and Indiana in the Eastern Conference Finals. Thank you for the love. Mike Fanning, a personality on Tobacco Road Sports Radio, saying Jimmy Butler still better than Ant-Man. And as a fellow Heat fan, I appreciate that comment and that support from Mike, who's commenting on our YouTube channel. Mike's a part of the show. You can be as well. And I agree. Like, Jimmy Butler is the guy. Like, he's playoff Jimmy for a reason. Wouldn't you agree, Esteban?
Oh, I think so too. That's gonna be interesting with that Minnesota series. I really am looking forward to that.
Dude, it's going to be interesting because the Timberwolves are playing the Dallas Mavericks. I know you're from Texas. I know you're a Spurs guy, but what Luka and Kyrie are doing, I didn't see it coming. I had lost all hope in Kyrie Irving, but somehow they're playing together and they've made it to the Western Conference Finals. Are you surprised that they beat the 1 seed in Oklahoma City and are going to the Western Conference Finals? We're one series away from the NBA Finals.
I know, that's crazy. Have you? Let me ask you this before. Have you seen that TikTok of that guy in the service station that's wearing the Dallas Mavericks conference champion hat that says 2026 on it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, 2 years away. All right, this Dallas team is phenomenal. I really do think they're playing some of the greatest basketball. Right, Luka is a phenomenal player. Right, and this is coming from a Spurs fan, obviously, but in that last game, they managed to hammer a comeback. That was kind of in a way like the Minnesota and the Denver series, because they staged that massive comeback at the end and they won by 1 point. The whole sequence, if you watched it back, was rather intriguing. Let's take a look at some stats here because I'm interested. Holmgren had 21 points. Williams had 22. This is for Oklahoma City. And then SGA had 36 points. So combined, those big three were putting down numbers in that game. And then you look at the Dallas side, it really didn't even match up. Jones Jr. had 22. Then you got Irving with 22. And then Doncic had a triple-double, 29, 10, and 10. Those are phenomenal numbers, Mike. That's amazing to me, right? And that's a consistent thing for him, too. He's been doing it all throughout the regular season. He was a candidate for the MVP again this year. And it's I don't know, man. I have no words. It's just phenomenal to see, a team like Dallas as what was it, 4th or 5th seed, right?
They're 5 seed.
Five seed, yeah. They knock off the number 1 seed in Oklahoma City, who I thought was actually going to lose it to Minnesota come those last few games of the year, the penultimate game of the year, when everything was going to be clinched between it was Denver, Minnesota, and then Oklahoma City. So that was really interesting too. But Oklahoma City's got a young team. They have a lot of good players on their team, right? It's starting to be a building process for them, and for them to have made it all the way to the Western semis, but then get knocked off by a more veteran team in Dallas, even though they were the lower seed, to me is very impressive.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, and especially, I mean, look at last year, the Miami Heat, coming in as a play-in team and making it to the NBA Finals against the Nuggets before they fell short. Like those are just incredible runs in the playoffs that we'll remember. It doesn't necessarily matter your seed or your number; only matters what you do once you get the playoffs. It's cliche to say, but your record is 0-0 at the start of these playoffs, and what you do from there on matters. I mean, we saw the Milwaukee Bucks as a 1 seed lose last year. We just saw the number 1 seed OKC Thunder lose this year. We just saw the defending champion Denver Nuggets lose. I mean, it's you just can't go based on the seeding that you have. Guys, remind you can be a part of the channel. Derek Polly saying afternoon, gents. That was plural because I'm being joined by Esteban Serrano on Out Pocket with Michael Davis. Now, it's exciting for the Mavericks that they are going to the Western Conference Finals. It was exciting for Texas Rangers fans like myself and you, Esteban, that the Rangers won the World Series last year. It's exciting. I see you wearing a Dallas Stars shirt.
Yep. Got a red right here. Shout out to Rally House in North Texas. I got this shirt from there. Pretty nice shirt. Have you been keeping up with hockey at all?
Dude, I've been keeping up, and it's so frustrating because the Carolina Hurricanes, that's my team over here. It's the only pro team I root for in North Carolina. And dude, how do you give up a 3-1 lead in an elimination game, game 6 on your home court, home ice, and you lose like 5-3 after giving up 4 goals in the third period to go home. Like, come on. Like, how do you do that?
Oh, why don't you ask Carolina? I mean, they're the ones who did it. I mean, and to like the point that like I was going to bring up, how do you win one game in the series, the first game in the series, right? Which is usually the momentum setter for the rest of the series, and then lose 4 straight to Dallas. Really and truly, is that?
Yeah, it's remarkable, man. And this is what makes these best of 7 series great. Like in baseball or basketball or hockey, not one game is the same. Like you could have like an off shooting night if it's basketball, you could have off pitching night if it's baseball. Hockey, you have so much that goes into a 7-game series. Mike saying seeing doesn't matter anymore. Home court doesn't matter. That's probably why the Hurricanes lost. And I've went home early. He's like, what matters is player versus player matchups.
Right. And even to the point of basketball too, like I agree with Mike, right? Like we just talked about a 1 versus a 5 team and the 5 team knocking off the 1 team, right? And then you can pretty much reciprocate it in any other sport, right? Like we talked about baseball, right? Because it's one thing to play for a spot to play for the championship, and then it's another thing to actually play for the championship. You know what I'm saying? Like come the playoffs and everything like that. That's why baseball is so hard to predict in the postseason. That's why the NCAA tournament's so hard to predict, right? That's a one and done deal. One team slips up and you're gone. It's over for you.
I mean, you've had Virginia as a 1 seed lose to UMBC of all schools. Like seeing doesn't matter.
Right, absolutely. And then now this year you had or 2 years prior, last year. I'm getting my years mixed up here. Last year you had Fairleigh Dickinson and knocked off Purdue, and they had one of the biggest stars or rising stars on their team in Zach Edey, right?
Yeah.
So that's a whole other deal in itself, like to actually go through the regular season, go through the motions and win, and then probably to play for a championship or a title or whatever you call it at the end of the season in the postseason. It's a totally different ballgame, and no pun intended with that, but it's so interesting to see all these teams now. Like NBA, I feel like it used to be more predictable. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Like it used to be a lot more predictable with who was going to win the matchups. The 1 seeds usually advanced. It was usually like a 1 versus a 3 in the conference finals, right? Occasionally you see like a 4 or 5, right? But now it's starting to become more of the off-seeded teams actually dominating their way to the end, right? No indication on why that is, but I think it's just because a lot of players out there too are hungry for something bigger once they realize, hey, we're in the postseason now, we're in the playoffs, let's do this.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think a couple things that go into that is, one, teams are getting higher seeds because they're resting a lot of their stars in the regular season. Like, how many games did Luka sit? How many games did Kyrie sit? I mean, those two weren't much.
You can blame Coach Pop and organization for that. The ones who started that trend.
But then you have years ago, you mentioned like how predictable it was. It was so predictable that the Cavs and the Warriors were going to the NBA Finals, and you knew that in November.
When we thought it wouldn't end either, right? All the memes came out about it's going to be 20, 40 something, and we're still going to be seeing the the Cavs and the Warriors playing, and then LeBron's going to have clones of himself, and he's going to be dominating against Curry and all them. They're going to be in their 70s. It's going to be funny.
And LeBron's going to play with this kid, which actually might happen this year. We'll be covering a lot of the NBA draft here over the course of the summer. Derek mentioning, yes, I enjoy seeing different teams playing for a chip, and
Absolutely.
we're going to predict at the end of the show who those guys will be. We have the Dallas Mavericks, Minnesota Timberwolves, Boston Celtics, and Indiana Pacers to choose from. But I did want to mention, because we do have Esteban on the show, it's a special treat. He's super busy. He does really great stuff with Bernie Radio over in Texas. You're doing incredible stuff. Now, the Stars are in the conference finals. The Mavs are in the conference finals. The Rangers won the World Series. The Dallas Cowboys the running joke with them on social media, and if you're a Cowboys fan, you can't avoid it, no matter how hard I try, is the Dallas Cowboys just can't get to the NFC Championship game. They're, they're the only ones who can't get to their conference championship, their conference finals. So I want to kind of break this down. First of all, what is the most impressive run that you've seen over the last 365 days of getting to the conference championship? Is it, the Rangers last year? Is it the Mavs this year? Is it the Stars? Like, of those three teams, who are you like, wow, they really shouldn't have been here, and I'm glad they made it?
The Rangers. I'm going to be completely honest with you. The gamut of emotions that my family and I went through when we were watching them in the playoffs was they lost on the last day of the regular season. They lost the division to the Houston Astros because the Astros won their game that day. I think they were playing, if I'm not mistaken, they were playing like Oakland or something, right? So they had an easy, what you'd assume was an easy outing, right? Or I could be wrong on that. But I remember the Rangers playing up in Seattle, if I was not wrong. And they lost on the last day of the regular season, and it was like, okay, what now, right? Like they're going to be a wild card team. They go in and sweep Tampa, then they go in and sweep Baltimore. Then they got to face Houston again, and it's revenge time, right? And that series was probably the most stressful thing I've ever sat through, Mike, because I didn't know how the Houston series was going to go. And then it goes game 7, and Bruce Bochy, undefeated in game 7, continues his streak, and we're going to a World Series. Now, playing against the Diamondbacks was a Cinderella story in itself because they were a totally different team than the Rangers. But to some extent, too, the Rangers really never had like the best record, even in the AL. They were still kind of salvaging whatever they could toward the end of the season, and unfortunately they fell into a hole. So if I had to say, like, of all three teams that have made it so far, the Rangers would probably be the ones that have shocked me the most. I'm happy they won, don't get me wrong, but I don't think a lot of people, including myself as a fan, expected them to do what they did.
And that's what's bonded us, Esteban, was, being Rangers fans, being Cowboys fans. And now the Cowboys, other than the Washington Commanders, have the longest drought to reach an NFC Championship game. Do you see that streak coming to a close here soon, maybe here in the next day or next year or 2 or 3? And how can they propel themselves to break through that glass ceiling that's just been obtainable since mid-90s?
Look, I'm not going to hold my breath with the Cowboys. I love to watch them. They're my team, right? It's frustrating. And I think a lot of people are hopping on this train of, well, what is Jerry Jones doing, right? I mean, the free agency market and the draft, it always seems so minuscule compared to what other teams do. And you're like, man, Cowboys could have had that player, or Cowboys could have gotten him, or, free agency. It's always, oh, we're looking at Dallas, right? But then they end up going to like Atlanta or another team, right? I feel like that's a common trend with a lot of free agents. I mean, this year's going to really be a determining factor in whether or not Dak stays, first and foremost, because they already said they're not going to re-sign him, or they're not going to pay him again. So he's out of the water. You got Ezekiel Elliott back, but considering he spent time in New England, I say fairly decent, but he had that off year in Dallas before he left 2 years ago now. What are you gonna do with that sort of thing? And then you have like Pollard, he got injured, and there's a lot of determining factors with the Cowboys. It's almost like a curse, right? Like we talk about curses in sports all the time, like the Cubs. Right, 100 and something years before they won again. You realize how many people that were Cubs fans have died in that time just trying to watch them win a World Series. I don't want to, I don't want to curse that on the Cowboys, right? Because I love them or whatever. But there's only, from the business side, it's like, what can you do? Like how much can you trust Jerry Jones to actually, in his hands, sign the free agents that need to be signed? Stephen Jones as well. What kind of factor is he playing in it as well, right? It's all about business at this point, Mike. I think the anatomy of the team's great. I think the team is very lovable, right? It's just those missing puzzle pieces, that key component, that one key in the keyhole that doesn't fit, I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, it's interesting. And, on our pocket, we were covering the NFL free agency when we came back live on weekdays. You guys can subscribe to the Tobacco Road Sports Rays YouTube channel. By the way, comments pouring in from Mac and Mike and Brett as well, talking about, how much coaching matters, how much, the Cowboys are, going towards it. Brett being a big hockey guy, and we talked about the Dallas Stars just a moment ago, saying how much coaching matters or doesn't matter, and everyone needing a true goalie.
Ottinger, the best goalie in hockey right now, by the way.
You think so?
Absolutely. Are you kidding me? Watching that game 6 was the most stressful thing ever. We stayed up till 1:30 in the hotel because I was covering baseball that night down near the coast. And I got back to the hotel, and by the time double overtime came around, which they should have scored that first goal, that first goal should have actually counted because of some goalie interference that they had found or something. That's a whole other conversation. But by the time double overtime came around, so many of those shots from Colorado have come into the blue area, and Ottinger was looking like a ninja just trying to save them all the way around. It's absolutely insane. Yeah. 0.963 SV in the playoffs. Absolutely. Yeah. Absurdity. I agree. Brett, I absolutely agree.
Esteban's a numbers guy. Brett's a numbers guy. 93.6% save percentage. No one knows what goalie interference is anymore. Not even the league.
I agree. I mean, it's becoming like what's a catch in the NFL, right? The way Dallas was robbed that one year. Okay. The NHL really needs to sit down this offseason and say, okay, are we really going to give the goalie past the blue area to defend the net, or is the blue area what he needs to defend and only defend? And if somebody gets pushed into him, that's not anybody else's problem. The skater's problem.
Hey, I will go to my grave saying that Des caught it. I know we only have a few more minutes left live here on Tobacco Road Sports Rays YouTube channel. You guys can go subscribe. Kind of wrapping up the Cowboys topic. Man, I know the criticism with the free agency, not going to get Derrick Henry. That's the one I'm like, or not going to get Stephon Gilmore, who's still a free agent right now. I would love to pair Gilmore and Diggs and Bland together and run with it, especially knowing the weapons that the Philadelphia Eagles have. The Giants went and drafted Malik Neighbors. Washington has Scary Terry, and they're trying to retool that offense right now. The Cowboys draft really well. I just hope these draft picks step up day one and they actually propel the Dallas Cowboys to the next round and to the conference championship. And speaking of the next round, there's 4 NBA teams who are trying to get to the NBA finals. I teased it since the beginning of the show. We're going to predict as we go out today on our live stream. The Celtics Pacers, Eastern Conference Finals, Mavs Timberwolves, Western Conference Finals. Who do you think wins these series? And I'm going to have you put a number. How many games does it take?
Okay, I'll start with the West. I think, to be honest with you, Dallas and Minnesota, really good matchup, really even matchup. It's a matter of defense and offense because I think Dallas has the better offense. I think Minnesota has the better defense. Which one's going to prevail? I have absolutely no idea. I'm going to go with – pains me, but I'm going to go with Dallas in this series. I'm going to go seven games in that one. Dallas is going to shock the world. They're going to the finals. And then on the other side, I think the Pacers run out of gas. I think their little run has come to an end. They, Halliburton and all them, they're really good. It's just a matter of, being able to keep up with the Celtics. And I think the Celtics have the better team with Jason Tatum. I'm going with Boston. We'll go 6 for that one.
Okay, so you got Mavs in 7, Boston in 6. The comments are pouring in. Mike Fanning, Mac Davis, and Brett Wiseman all bringing their comments. Brett saying the Wild are this close to calling Ant, see if he can skate. I mean, hey, if they weren't playing in the NBA's Western Conference Finals, I'm sure they would. Mike predicting Pacers in 6, going the exact opposite of Esteban right there. Out of gas, question mark. That's a good point, especially when you think about, Luka, with the Mavs, and that's why I'm glad we're not seeing the Knicks in the NBA Finals because they're a shell of their former selves at this point. For my predictions, I am going to go. My dad would hate me if I picked against the Mavs, but I'm going to. Love you, Dad. I'm going to go Minnesota in 6 games. Just because I think Ant's on a different level right now. So is Luka. But when you talk about the defensive presence downstairs with Rudy Gobert, Derek Lively is going to be a big problem. Derek Lively is going to be a big problem in the NBA going forward. I just don't think it's the time for Dallas yet. And for the NBA's Eastern Conference, I really like Indiana's offense, but it just seems like Boston's been on cruise control. They haven't had to exert too much. And I feel that benefits them because I'm getting Boston. I'll go Boston 6. I feel like that's a pretty fair one. And to end in our pocket today, I am disowned. There's the hammer. But guys, if you enjoyed our live stream, we're live Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. I have a wrestling podcast on Wednesdays that drop on Tobacco Road Sports Radio's YouTube channel. You can subscribe now. Share with your friends, by the way. Let them know that we're here creating great stuff for you. If you're enjoying it, please share it with your friends. Please share it on your social medias. Go follow Esteban Serrano and all the stuff he's doing locally back in Texas. Super excited to have the Stars and Spikes co-host with me on Out of Pocket today for just a one-on-one conversation. It's great seeing your face. Great getting to chat with you, my friend.
Likewise, brother. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Hope to do this very soon again. Again, Out of Pocket will be back tomorrow, Tuesday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern time for your lunch break with Top Rope Tuesday. All the Out of Pocket episodes from last week are also available on the Tobacco Road Sports Radio's YouTube channel. But for Michael Davis, Esteban Serrano, this has been Out of Pocket on Tobacco Road Sports Radio, and we will see you tomorrow at 12:30 p.m. Eastern time for Out of Pocket with Michael Davis.